My name is Olivia, and this is a story I never thought I'd have to tell. I work part-time in the cosmetics department of a drugstore, mostly in the evenings. Being a student, those late shifts fit into my schedule perfectly. It wasn't a bad neighborhood at all. It was middle to upper class. I never really felt scared working there at night. After all, there were always at least 4 employees in the store at any given time. But no matter how nice a neighborhood seems, trouble always finds its way in. The store's theft rate had hit an all-time high, mostly happening during the evenings. To make things safer for both the staff and the store's products, the company hired a security firm to watch over the store, especially the cosmetics section. It was a relief, really. The cosmetics department was tucked away in a quiet corner of the store, and only one person, usually a woman, worked in that section at a time. So having a security guard nearby was comforting, especially on long, lonely nights. I worked 4 evenings a week, and another girl, Janice, covered the rest. The schedule was pretty consistent, and it didn't take long before I noticed that the same guard was always there when I worked. He was a guy around 25, not exactly handsome, but he was friendly enough. His name was Lucas. Lucas would stand near my counter in his uniform, just his presence scaring away anyone with bad intentions. We often chatted to pass the time, and I, being the overly talkative person I am, shared more than I probably should have. I noticed after a while that he was the only guard scheduled during my shifts. When I asked him about it, he said, "Yeah, you're stuck with me now." At the time, I didn't think much of it. Maybe it was just coincidence. One evening, I went to the store on my night off to pick something up. When I walked in, I saw a different guard with Janice. Confused, I said, "Oh, it must be Lucas's night off." The other guard, without missing a beat, replied, "Lucas only works Sunday through Wednesday." A chill ran down my spine. That was my exact schedule. My naive 20-year-old brain tried to brush it off as a coincidence. Life went on as usual, until the strange encounters started piling up. First, I ran into Lucas at a movie theater in my town. He had told me before that he lived 20 minutes away, in a town that had its own theater. Why would he drive all the way to my town? Then, he started showing up at my work on days when I picked up extra shifts, even though he wasn't supposed to be on duty. He claimed he was on lunch, and that he now got his prescriptions from our store because the service was better. I casually asked the pharmacy tech if Lucas had filled any prescriptions that day. She said no. The real turning point came one evening when Lucas showed me pictures from a road trip he had taken. I was swiping through his phone looking at scenic photos when I accidentally swiped one too many times. There it was, a full-blown half-naked pic. I froze, then quickly handed the phone back, laughing nervously. Oops. I think I went too far, but Lucas didn't seem embarrassed at all. Instead, he smirked and said, "I was hoping you'd see that." The creepy grin on his face sent shivers down my spine. That was when I knew something was seriously wrong. The next morning, I called his security company. I didn't want to get Lucas in too much trouble, but I told them I was uncomfortable and asked if they could switch his post or at least adjust his schedule. They listened, and the next night, a different guard was stationed at the store. I felt relieved, until the real terror began. When my shift ended that night and we locked up the store, I heard the sound of a car engine starting. It was coming from a dark corner of the parking lot. My stomach twisted in knots as I realized it was the same car Lucas drove. He had parked in the shadows, watching us. Trying to convince myself it was just someone else with a similar car, I hurried to my own vehicle. But when I got there, I found a note tucked under the windshield wiper. My heart raced as I read it. "I'm so sad my location got changed. I'll try to come back to your store soon. In the meantime, Let's get together. He had even left his phone number. I felt sick. My hands shook as I drove home. The next day I called his supervisor again, this time telling him everything about the note, the stalking, the half-naked pic. My store manager, a no-nonsense kind of guy, also called and told the security company that Lucas was no longer welcome at our store. For a few weeks, things seemed to return to normal. Lucas was gone and I hadn't heard from him. I thought I was safe. I even stopped telling my boyfriend and family about it because I didn't want to worry them. But then one dark, rainy evening, everything changed. I was setting up a new fall collection, and the rain made it nearly impossible to see out into the parking lot. The store's large windows only reflected the bright lights inside. As I knelt down to stock a bottom shelf, I heard a car horn honk outside. I glanced up out of habit and caught sight of something terrifying in the window's reflection. Lucas was standing behind me, just staring. I jumped up, heart pounding. He didn't say a word, just stood there with that same creepy grin on his face. I quickly walked to the other side of the store where my manager was working. When I told him what had happened, he rushed back to the cosmetics department, but by the time he got there, Lucas was gone. We checked the security footage later, and sure enough, there he was, standing motionless behind me, watching. That night, my manager called the security company again, only to find out that Lucas had quit his job after being told to stay away from our store. You might wonder why I didn't call the police sooner, but at the time it didn't seem like a big enough threat. No one had been hurt yet. It wasn't until I told my boyfriend and parents that they convinced me to take more precautions. From then on, I stopped driving myself to work. My boyfriend or parents would drop me off and pick me up. One Sunday night, though, my parents were out of town, and my boyfriend had a meeting he couldn't miss. I had to drive myself to work. I parked in the far end of the parking lot, right near a river that had some benches by it. It was a creepy, dark spot with almost no lights, but it was the only place left to park. After my shift ended, I started walking to my car. That's when I heard a voice that sent a jolt of terror through me. Why would you do this to me? Why make me think you wanted me? It was Lucas. Just as panic set in, I saw Jim, the pharmacist, taking out the trash. I ran to him, shouting, "Call 911, the police arrived." But Lucas had vanished without a trace. I never saw him again, and to this day I hope I never do.